Latin America is a region of captivating beauty, cultural diversity, and untapped possibilities. From the vibrant streets of Rio de Janeiro to the ancient ruins of Machu Picchu, this region holds a magnetic allure. However, behind the colorful facade lies a persistent challenge: poverty. Latin America is a tapestry of contrasts. It boasts some of the world's wealthiest economies, yet it is home to a significant portion of the global impoverished population. So, what factors contribute to this persistent struggle for prosperity? To truly understand Latin America's struggle with poverty, we must delve into its complex historical, political, and socio-economic dynamics. From colonial legacies to modern-day challenges, this region faces a unique set of obstacles. In this thought-provoking video, we'll explore the historical factors that have shaped Latin America's development, including colonization, economic dependency, and unequal resource distribution. We'll also examine the impact of political instability, corruption, and the vicious cycle of poverty. But before we dive in, be sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you won't miss any of our eye-opening videos. Now, let's get started. Spanish colonization played a significant role in shaping the socio-economic conditions that persist in Latin America today. While it would be oversimplifying to attribute Latin America's poverty solely to Spanish colonization, it undoubtedly had a profound and lasting impact on the region's development. One of the key effects of Spanish colonization was the exploitation of resources. The primary aim of the Spanish colonizers was to extract the vast wealth of the New World, including gold, silver, and other valuable resources. This led to a system of economic exploitation, where indigenous populations were forced into labor-intensive activities, such as mining and agriculture, to benefit the Spanish crown and its colonizers. This extractive model hindered the development of diverse and sustainable economies in Latin America. The encomienda system is another aspect of Spanish colonization that contributed to Latin America's current poverty. This system granted Spanish colonizers vast tracts of land and control over indigenous labor. Resembling feudalism, the encomienda system further perpetuated the exploitation of native populations, denying them basic rights and freedoms. The forced labor, disease, and violence inflicted on indigenous communities resulted in massive depopulation and disrupted traditional social cultures, hindering social and economic progress. Spanish colonization also fostered a culture of monopoly and dependence. The Spanish crown tightly controlled trade and commerce in its colonies through monopolies and restrictive policies. This limited the development of local industries and stifled innovation as Latin American economies became reliant on exporting raw materials and importing finished goods. This dependence on external markets hindered the growth of domestic industries and diversified economies, contributing to ongoing economic challenges. It is important to note that Spanish colonization alone does not account for all the factors contributing to Latin America's poverty today. There are other historical, political, and socio-economic dynamics that have shaped the region's development. However, the legacy of Spanish colonization in terms of resource exploitation, social disruption, and economic dependence has undoubtedly left a lasting impact on Latin America's struggle with poverty. Political instability refers to a lack of continuity and stability in the governance and leadership of a country. In Latin America, frequent changes in government, coups, and political unrest have hindered economic growth and development. Instability creates an uncertain environment for businesses, both domestic and foreign, discouraging investments and stifling economic progress. It also leads to policy inconsistency, making it challenging to implement long-term development plans and reforms. Political instability can result from a range of factors, including weak institutions, polarization, social unrest, and conflicts between different political factions. These factors often stem from historical divisions, social inequality, and unresolved political and social issues. As a consequence, political instability undermines governments, undermines trust in institutions, and reduces the effectiveness of public policies. Corruption, both systemic and petty, has been a persistent challenge in Latin America. Corruption refers to the abuse of public office for personal gain, bribery, embezzlement, and nepotism. It diverts public resources away from essential services and infrastructure, perpetuating poverty and inequality. Corruption undermines the rule of law, weakens public institutions, and erodes public trust in government. Corruption is particularly damaging in the context of poverty alleviation and development. It undermines the effectiveness of social programs and public investments intended to benefit the most vulnerable populations. It also fosters a culture of impunity, where those responsible for corruption often go unpunished, further eroding trust in institutions and discouraging foreign investment. Corruption and political instability are often interconnected, as corrupt practices can fuel political instability, and unstable political environments can facilitate corruption. This cycle creates a vicious circle where poverty persists, and resources that could be used for development are misappropriated. Additionally, corruption undermines fair competition, distorts markets, and hampers economic growth. It reduces the attractiveness of Latin American countries for foreign direct investment, as investors may be hesitant to operate in an environment where corruption is prevalent. Addressing political instability and corruption requires comprehensive reforms and strengthening of institutions, including promoting transparency, accountability, and the rule of law. Efforts to combat corruption and ensure political stability are essential for creating an enabling environment for sustainable economic development and poverty reduction in Latin America. The resource curse, also known as the paradox of plenty, refers to a phenomenon where countries rich in natural resources experience slower economic growth, higher levels of corruption, and increased inequality. In the context of Latin America, the resource curse has been a contributing factor to the region's ongoing poverty. Many Latin American countries are rich in natural resources, including oil, gas, minerals, and agricultural products. While these resources hold significant economic potential, the heavy reliance on primary commodity exports can create vulnerabilities. Fluctuations in global commodity prices can lead to volatile revenue streams, making it challenging for governments to plan and invest in unsustainable development. The overemphasis on resource extraction often leads to the neglect of other sectors, such as manufacturing and services, which could provide more diverse and stable sources of income. Limited access to resources is a significant factor in perpetuating poverty in rural areas in Latin America. These regions often lack access to essential services such as education, healthcare, clean water, and sanitation facilities. The absence of these basic services hampers human capital development and diminishes opportunities for individuals to improve their living conditions. Without access to quality education and healthcare, people in rural areas struggle to acquire the necessary skills and knowledge to escape poverty. Another aspect of the rural-urban divide is the heavy dependence on agriculture in rural regions. Traditional agricultural practices in Latin America often involve subsistence farming or small-scale production, which are vulnerable to challenges such as inadequate technology, limited access to credit in markets, and climate change. As a result, rural communities struggle to generate sufficient income and remain trapped in a cycle of poverty. The lack of investment and support for modernizing agricultural practices and diversifying rural economies further exacerbates this issue. Unequal land distribution is another crucial factor contributing to the rural-urban divide and poverty in Latin America. A small portion of the population often owns a large proportion of productive land, while many rural individuals and communities suffer from landlessness or lack secure land tenure. This situation limits economic opportunities for those without land and perpetuates inequalities. Without access to land, rural populations face challenges in establishing sustainable livelihoods and income sources. The limited employment opportunities in rural areas also contribute to the persistence of poverty. These regions often lack diversified economic activities and formal job opportunities. High rates of unemployment and underemployment prevail, forcing many individuals to migrate to urban areas in search of better prospects. This migration further strains urban infrastructure and contributes to the perpetuation of poverty in rural regions. The lack of alternative employment options in rural areas increases the vulnerability of these communities and prevents them from breaking the cycle of poverty. Inadequate infrastructure development is another consequence of the rural-urban divide. Rural areas often suffer from inadequate transportation networks, electricity grids, and telecommunication systems. The lack of infrastructure limits market access, inhibits economic growth, and hinders the provision of essential public services. Insufficient investment in education and healthcare facilities further deepens the rural-urban divide and perpetuates poverty, as individuals in rural areas face additional barriers to accessing quality services. Lastly, the social and political marginalization of rural communities in Latin America plays a significant role in perpetuating poverty. Rural populations are often excluded from decision-making processes and have limited access to political power. This exclusion exacerbates socioeconomic disparities and limits the ability of rural populations to influence policies and advocate for their interests. As a result, rural areas often receive inadequate public investments and policies, further perpetuating the cycle of poverty. And that's all for today. Let us know what you think of the video. We'll be back with another video soon.